Hi, 4th and 5th graders. Today we are going to continue on with Matilda, reading chapters 13 and 14. So the last one, we had Lavender, who went and dug for the newt, and I showed you the picture of what a newt looks like. And she has this plan where when Miss Trunchbull comes to each class to teach, she needs a jug of water and a cup. That's the thing she requests. Well, Lavender's job was to get this jug of water. So she got the jug of water and put it on the table and then put the newt in the water, which is kind of like a salamander or lizardy type animal, if you don't remember, along with all this seaweed. So this chapter, you might find out what happens with that. So, chapter 13, the weekly test. At 2 o'clock sharp, the class assembled, including Miss Honey, who noted that the jug of water and the glass were in the proper place. Then she took up position standing right at the back. Everyone waited. Suddenly in marched the gigantic figure of the headmistress, in her belted shirt and green pants. "Good afternoon, children," she barked. "Good afternoon, Miss Trunchbull," they chirped. The headmistress stood before the class, legs apart, hands on hips, glaring at the small boys and girls who sat nervously at their desks in front of her. "Not a very pretty sight," she said. Her expression was one of utter distaste, as though she were looking at something a dog had done in the middle of the floor. "What a bunch of nauseating little warts you are." Everyone had the sense to stay silent. "It makes me vomit," she went on, "to think that I'm going to have to put up with this load of garbage like you in my school for the next 6 years. I can see that I'm going to have to expel as many of you as possible, as soon as possible, to save myself from going round the bend." She paused and snorted several times. It was a curious noise. You can hear the same sort of thing if you walk through a riding stable when the horses are being fed. "I suppose," she went on, "your mothers and fathers tell you that you're wonderful. Well, I'm here to tell you the opposite, and you'd better believe me. Stand up, everyone." They all got quickly to their feet. "Now put your hands out in front of you, and as I walk past you, I want to turn them over so I can see if they are clean on both sides." The Trunchbull began a slow march along the rows of desks, inspecting the hands. All went well until she came to a small boy in the second row. "What's your name?" she barked. "Nigel," the boy said. "Nigel what?" "Nigel Hicks," the boy said. "Nigel Hicks what?" the Trunchbull bellowed. She bellowed so loud she nearly blew the little chap out the window. "That's it," Nigel said, "unless you want my middle names as well." He was a brave little fellow, and one could see that he was trying not to be scared by the monster who towered above him. "I do not want your middle names, you blister," the monster yelled. "What is my name?" "Miss Trunchbull," Nigel said. "Then use it when you address me. Now then, let's try again. What's your name?" "Nigel Hicks, Miss Trunchbull," Nigel said. "That's better," the Trunchbull said. "Your hands are filthy, Nigel. When did you last wash them?" "Well, let me think," Nigel said. "That's rather difficult to remember exactly. It could have been yesterday, or it could have been the day before that." The Trunchbull's whole body and face seemed to swell up as though she were being inflated by a bicycle pump. So there is the Trunchbull yelling at poor little Nigel because he's dirty. "I knew it," she bellowed. "I knew as soon as I saw you that you are nothing but a piece of filth. What is your father's job? A sewage worker?" "He's a doctor," Nigel said, "and a jolly good one. He says we're all so covered with bugs anyway that a bit of extra dirt never hurts anyone." "I'm glad he's not my doctor," the Trunchbull said. "And why, might I ask? Is there a baked bean on the front of your shirt?" "We had them for lunch, Miss Trunchbull." "And do you usually put your lunch on the front of your shirt, Nigel? Is that what his famous doctor father of yours has taught you to do?" "Baked beans are hard to eat, Miss Trunchbull. They keep falling off my fork." "You are disgusting," the Trunchbull yelled. "You are a walking germ factory. I don't wish to see any more of you today. Go and stand in the corner on one leg and with your face in the wall." "But Miss Trunchbull—" "Don't argue with me, boy, or I'll make you stand on your head. Now, Do as you're told. Nigel went. Now, stay where you are, boy. While I test you on your spelling to see if you've learned anything at all this past week. And don't turn around when you talk to me. Keep your nasty little face to the wall. Now, spell right. Which one? Nigel asked. The thing you do with a pen, or the one that means the opposite of wrong? He happened to be an unusually bright child, and his mother had worked with him at home on spelling and reading. The one with the pen, you little fool. There's a Trunchbull, and there's Nigel standing on one leg in the corner. And looking at this picture, it kind of always makes me laugh at how big her hand is. Nigel spelled it correctly, which surprised the Trunchbull. She thought he had given him a very tricky word, one that he wouldn't have learnt yet, and she was mad that he had succeeded. Then Nigel said, still balancing on one leg and facing the wall, Miss Honey taught us how to spell a new, very long word yesterday. And what word was that? The Trunchbull asked. Her voice became softer, and they knew that was greater danger, but Nigel wasn't to know this. Difficulty, Nigel said. Everyone in the class can spell difficulty now. What nonsense, the Trunchbull said. You are not supposed to learn long words like that until you are at least 8 or 9. And don't try to tell me everybody in this class can spell that word. You are lying to me, Nigel. Test someone, Nigel said, taking an awful chance. Test anyone you like. The Trunchbull's dangerous, glittering eyes roved around the classroom. You, she said, pointing at a tiny and rather daft little girl called Prudence. Spell difficulty. Amazingly, Prudence spelled it correctly, and without a moment's hesitation. The Trunchbull was properly taken back. Humph, she snorted. And I suppose Miss Honey wasted the whole of one lesson teaching you to spell that one single word. Oh, no, she didn't, piped Nigel. Miss Honey taught it to us in 3 minutes, so we'll never forget it. She teaches us lots of words in 3 minutes. And what exactly is this magic method, Miss Honey? Asked the headmistress. I'll show you, piped up the brave Nigel again, coming to Miss Honey's rescue. Can I put my other foot down and turn around, please, while I show you? You may do neither, snapped the Trunchbull. Stay as you are and show me just the same. All right, said Nigel, wobbling crazily on one leg. Miss Honey gives us a little song about each word, and we all sing it together, and we learn to spell it in no time. Would you like to hear the song about difficulty? I should be fascinated, the Trunchbull said in a voice dripping in sarcasm. Here it is, Nigel said. Mrs. D, Mrs. I, Mrs. FFI, Mrs. C, Mrs. U, Mrs. LTY. That spells difficulty. How perfectly ridiculous, snorted the Trunchbull. Why are all these women married? And anyway, you're not meant to teach poetry when you're teaching spelling. Cut it out in future, Miss Honey. But it does teach them some of the harder words wonderfully well, Miss Honey murmured. Don't argue with me, Miss Honey, the headmistress thundered. Just do as you're told. I shall now test the class on the multiplication table to see if Miss Honey has taught you anything at all in that direction. The Trunchbull had returned to her place in the front of the class, and her diabolical gaze was slowly moving along the rows of tiny students. You, she barked, pointing at a small boy called Rupert in the front row. What is 2 sevens? 16, Rupert answered with foolish abandon. The Trunchbull started advancing, slow and soft-footed, upon Rupert in the manner of a tiger stalking a small deer. Rupert suddenly became aware of the danger signals and quickly tried again. It's 18, he cried. 2 sevens is 18, not 16. You ignorant little slug, the Trunchbull bellowed. You witless weed, you empty-headed hamster, you stupid glob of glue. She had now stationed herself directly behind Rupert, and suddenly she extended a hand the size of a tennis racket and grabbed all the hair on Rupert's head in her fist. Rupert had a lot of golden-colored hair. His mother thought it was beautiful to behold and took delight in allowing it to grow extra long. The Trunchbull had a great dislike for long hair on boys, as she had for braids and pigtails on girls, and she was now about to show it. She took a firm grip on Rupert's long golden hair with her giant hand. Then, by raising her muscular right arm, she lifted the helpless boy clean out of his chair and held him in the air. So she's grabbed Rupert by his golden hair, and golden hair is like a blonde. grabbed him by his hair and pulled it straight up with her arm and is holding him up out of his seat in the air by his hair. Now, if you've ever had your hair pulled, it can hurt if someone does it hard. Now, imagine being held up by your hair. Probably not enjoyable. Rupert yelled. He twisted and squirmed and kicked the air and went on yelling like a stuck pig. And Miss Trunchbull bellowed, 2 7s are 14. 2 7s are 14. I am not letting you go till you say it. From the back of the room, Miss Honey cried out, Miss Trunchbull, please let him go. You're hurting him. All his hair might come out. There's the Trunchbull. And there's poor Rupert being held up by his hair. And there's some concerned classmates. And well it might, if he doesn't stop wiggling, snorted the Trunchbull. Keep still, you squirming worm. It really was quite an extraordinary sight to see this giant headmistress dangling the small boy high in the air, and the boy spinning and twisting like something on the end of a string and shrieking his head off. Say it, yelled the Trunchbull. Say 2 7s are 14. Hurry up, or I'll start jerking you up and down, and your hair really will come out, and we'll have enough of it to stuff a sofa. Get on with it, boy. Say 2 7s is 14. I'll let you go then. 2 7s are 14, gasped Rupert, whereupon the Trunchbull, true to her word, opened her hand and quite literally let him go. He was a long way from the ground when she released him, and he plummeted to the earth and hit the floor and bounced like a football. Get up and stop whimpering, the Trunchbull barked. Rupert got up and went back to his desk, massaging his scalp with both hands. The Trunchbull returned to the front of the class. The children sat there hypnotized. None of them had seen anything quite like this before. It was splendid entertainment. It was better than TV, but with one big difference. If this room was an enormous human bomb in front of them which was liable to explode and blow someone to bits any moment. The children's eyes were riveted on the headmistress. Riveted means like they can't look away. They're like staring at her. I don't like small people, she was saying. Small people should never be seen by anybody. They should be kept out of sight in boxes like hairpins and buttons. I cannot for the life of me see why children have to take so long to grow up. I think they do it on purpose. Another extremely brave little boy in the front room spoke up and said, But surely you were a small person once, Miss Trunchbull, weren't you? I was never a small person, she snapped. I have been large all my life. I don't see why others can't be the same way. But you must have started out as a baby, the boy said. Me? A baby? Shouted the Trunchbull. How dare you suggest such a thing? What cheek? What infernal insolence? What's your name, boy? And stand up when you speak to me. She's saying, what craziness are you saying? The boy stood up. My name is Eric Ink, Miss Trunchbull, he said. Eric what? The Trunchbull shouted. Ink, the boy said. Don't be crazy, boy. There's no such name. Look in the phone book, Eric said. You'll see my father there under Ink. Very well, then, the Trunchbull said. You may be Ink, young man, but let me tell you something. You're not indelible. I'll very soon rub you out if you try getting clever with me. Spell what? I don't understand, Eric said. What do you want me to spell? Spell what, you idiot? Spell the word what? W-O-T, Eric said, answering too quickly. There was a nasty silence. I'll give you one more chance, the Trunchbull said, not moving. Ah, yes, Eric said. Hi, it's got an H in it. W-H-O-T. It's easy. In two large strides, the Trunchbull was behind Eric's desk, and there she stood, a pillar of doom towering over the helpless boy. Eric glanced fearfully back over his shoulder at the monster. I was right, wasn't I? He murmured. You were wrong, the Trunchbull barked. In fact, you strike me as some sort of poisonous little pockmark that will always be wrong. You sit wrong, you look wrong, you speak wrong. You are wrong all around. I will give you one more chance to be right. Spell what? Eric hesitated. Then he said very slowly, It's not W-O-T, and it's not W-H-O-T. I know. It must be W-H-O-T-T. Standing behind Eric, the Trunchbull reached out and took hold of the boy's 2 ears, one with each hand, pinching them between her forefinger and thumb. "Ow!" Eric cried. "Ow, you're hurting me!" "I haven't started yet," the Trunchbull said. And now, taking a firm grip on his 2 ears, she lifted him out of his seat and held him in the air. Like Rupert before him, Eric squealed the house down. From the back of the room, Miss Honey cried out, "Miss Trunchbull, don't! Please let him go! His ears might come off!" "They'll never come off," the Trunchbull said. "I have discovered through long experience, Miss Honey, that the ears of small boys are stuck very firmly to their heads." So there is Miss Trunchbull holding the student by his ears, which would be painful. "Let him go, Miss Honey, or let him go, Miss Trunchbull, please," begged Miss Honey. "You could damage him. You really could. You could wrench them right off." "Ears never come off," the Trunchbull shouted. "They stretch most marvelously, like these are doing now, but I can assure you they will never come off." Eric was squealing louder than ever and pedaling in the air with his legs. Matilda had never before seen a boy, or anyone else for that matter, held in the air by his ears alone. Like Miss Honey, she felt sure both ears were going to come off at any moment with all the weight that was on them. So here's Miss Honey, super concerned, along with all the students, like, something bad could happen, which I agree. The Trunchbull was shouting, "The word what is spelled W-H-A-T. Now spell it, you little wart." Eric didn't hesitate. He had learned from watching Rupert a few minutes before that the quicker you answer, the quicker you're released. "W-H-A-T, he squealed, "spells what?" Still holding him by the ears, the Trunchbull lowered him back into his chair behind his desk. Then she marched back to the front of the room, dusting off her hands against each other, like someone who has done something rather dirty. "That's the way you make them learn, Miss Honey," she said. "You take it from me. It's no good just telling them. You've got to hammer it into them. There's nothing like a little twisting and twiddling to encourage them to remember things. It concentrates their minds wonderfully." "You could do them permanent damage, Miss Trunchbull," Miss Honey cried out. "Oh, I have. I'm quite sure I have," the Trunchbull answered, grinning. "Eric's ears will have stretched quite considerably in the last couple of minutes. They'll be longer now than they were before. There's nothing wrong with that, Miss Honey. It'll give him an interesting pixie look for the rest of his life." "But Miss Trunchbull—" "Oh, do shut up, Miss Honey. You're as wet as any of them. If you can't cope in here, then you can go find a job in some cotton wool private school for rich brats. When you have been teaching for as long as I have, you'll realize that it's no good at all being kind to children. Read Nicholas Nickleby by Miss Honey by Mr. Dickens. Read about Mr. Wackford Squeers, the admirable headmaster at Dotheboys Hall. He knew how to handle the little brutes, didn't he? He knew how to use the birch, didn't he? He kept their backsides so warm you could have fried eggs and bacon on them. A fine book, that. But I don't suppose that bunch of morons you've got here will ever read it, because by the look of them, they're never going to learn to read anything." So basically they're saying, in the book Nicholas Nickleby, the headmaster at that school would hit the students. So she's saying, that's how you teach. "I've read it," Matilda said quietly. The Trunchbull flicked her head round and looked carefully at the small girl with dark hair and deep brown eyes sitting in the second row. "What did you say?" she asked sharply. "I said I've read it, Miss Trunchbull." "Read what?" "Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Trunchbull." "You are lying to me," the Trunchbull shouted, glaring at Matilda. "I doubt there's a single child in the entire school who has read that book, and here you are, an unhatched shrimp, sitting in the lowest form there is, trying to tell me a whopping great lie like that. Why do you do it? Why must you take me for a fool? Do you take me for a fool, child?" "Well," Matilda said. Then she hesitated. She would like to have said, "Yes, I jolly well do," but that would have been suicide. "Well," she said again, still hesitating, still refusing to say no. The Trunchbull sensed the child was thinking that she didn't like it. "Stand up when you speak to me," she snapped. "What is your name?" Matilda stood up. My name is Matilda Wormwood, Miss Trunchbull. Wormwood, is it? The Trunchbull said. In that case, you must be the daughter of the man who owns Wormwood Motors. There's Matilda and the Trunchbull. Yes, Miss Trunchbull. He's a crook, shouted Trunchbull. A week ago he sold me a second-hand car that he said was almost new. I thought he was a splendid fellow then, but this morning while I was driving that car through the village, the entire engine fell out onto the road. The whole thing was filled with sawdust. The man's a thief and a robber. I'll have his skin for sausages. You see I don't. He's clever at his business, Matilda said. Clever my foot, the Trunchbull shouted. Miss Honey tells me that you are meant to be clever too. Well, little lady, I don't like clever people. They are all crooked. You are most certainly crooked. Before I fell out with your father, he told me some very nasty stories about the way you behave at home. But you'd better not try anything at this school, young lady. I shall be keeping a very careful eye on you from now on. Sit down and keep quiet. So we still don't know what's going on with the newt that Lavender planted. But think about who Miss Trunchbull is likely to suspect as doing the newt trick. Because we're going to go on to read chapter 14, which is called The First Miracle. And we're going to hear a little bit more about this. Matilda sat down again at her desk. The Trunchbull seated herself behind the teacher's table. It was the first time she had sat down during the lesson. Then she reached out a hand and took hold of her water jug, still holding the jug by the hand, but not lifting it yet. She said, I have never been able to understand why small children are so disgusting. They are the bane of my life. They are like little insects. Why they should be got rid of as early as possible. We get rid of flies with a fly spray and by hanging up fly paper. I have often thought of inventing a spray for getting rid of small children. How splendid would it be to walk into this classroom with a gigantic spray gun in hand and start pumping it. Or better still, some huge strips of sticky paper. I would hang them all around the school and you'd get stuck to them and it would be the end of it. Wouldn't that be a good idea, Miss Honey? If it's meant to be a joke, headmistress, I don't think it's a very funny one, Miss Honey said from the back of the classroom. You wouldn't, would you, Miss Honey? The Trunchbull said. And it's not meant to be a joke. My idea of a perfect school, Miss Honey, is one that has no children in it at all. One of these days I shall start up a school like that. I think it'll be very successful. The woman's mad, Miss Honey was telling herself. She's round the twist. She's the one who ought to be got rid of. The Trunchbull now lifted a large blue porcelain water jug and poured some water into her glass. And suddenly, with the water, came out a long, slimy newt straight out of the glass. Plop! The Trunchbull let out a yell and leapt off her chair as though firecrackers had gone off underneath her. And now the children, who also saw the long, thin, slimy, yellow-bellied, lizard-like creature twisting and turning in the glass, and they squirmed and jumped about as well, shouting, What is it? Oh, it's disgusting! It's a snake! It's a baby crocodile! It's an alligator! Look out, Miss Trunchbull, cried Lavender. I'll bet it bites. The Trunchbull, this mighty giant, stood there in her green pants, shaking in her boots. She was especially mad that someone had succeeded in making her jump and yell like that, because she prided herself on her toughness. She stared at the creature twisting and wriggling in the glass. Curiously, though, she had never seen a newt before. Natural history was not her strong point. She hadn't the faintest idea of what this thing was. It certainly looked extremely unpleasant. Slowly she sat down again in her chair. She looked at this moment more terrifying than before. The fires of fury and hatred were smoldering in her small black eyes. Matilda, she barked, stand up. Who, me? Matilda said. What have I done? Stand up, you disgusting little cockroach. I haven't done anything, Miss Trunchbull. Honestly, I haven't. I've never seen that slimy thing before. Stand up at once, you filthy little maggot. Reluctantly, Matilda got to her feet. She was in the second row. There is the Trunchbull with the glass and the newt. Lavender was in the row behind her, feeling a bit guilty. She hadn't intended to get her friend in trouble. On the other hand, she was certainly not about to own up to it. You are a vile, repulsive, repellent, malicious little brute, the Trunchbull was shouting. You are not fit to be in this school. You ought to be behind bars. That's where you ought to be. I shall have drummed out of this establishment in utter disgrace. I shall have the perfect chase for you to down the corridor and out the front doors with hockey sticks. I shall have the staff escort you home under armed guard, and then I shall make absolutely sure you are sent to a reformatory school for delinquent girls for a minimum of 40 years. The Trunchbull was in such a rage that her face had taken on a boiled color, and little flecks of spit were gathering at the corners of her mouth. But she also was beginning to see red. She didn't in the least mind like being accused of something she hadn't done. I did not do it, she screamed. Oh, yes, you did, the Trunchbull roared back. Nobody else could have thought up a trick like that. Your father was right to warn me about you. The woman seemed to have lost control of herself completely. She was ranting like a maniac. You are finished in this school, young lady, she shouted. You are finished everywhere. I shall personally see to it that you are put away in a place where not even crows can land their droppings on you. You will probably never see the light of day again. I'm telling you, I did not do it, screamed Matilda. I've never even seen a creature like that in my life. As you can see, Oliver here has joined us, bugging us. Here is Trunchbull yelling, and then there's Matilda yelling back, saying she did not do it. And my cat is now trying to eat the book. You have put a crocodile in my drinking water, the Trunchbull yelled back. There is no worse crime in the world against a headmistress. Now sit down and don't say a word. Go on, sit down at once. But I'm telling you, Matilda shouted, refusing to sit down. I'm telling you to shut up, the Trunchbull roared. If you don't shut up at once and sit down, I shall remove my belt and let you have it with the end that has the buckle. Slowly, Matilda sat down. Oh, the rottenness of it all, the unfairness. How dare they expel her for something she hadn't done? The newt was still squirming in the tall glass of water. It looked horribly uncomfortable. The glass was not big enough for it, and Matilda glared at the Trunchbull. How she hated her. She glared at the glass, the newt in it. She longed to march up and grab the glass and tip the contents, newt and all, over the Trunchbull's head. She trembled to think that the Trunchbull would do to her if she did that. The Trunchbull was sitting behind the teacher's table, staring at the mixture in horror and fascination as the newt was wriggling in the glass. Matilda's eyes were also riveted on the glass, and now, quite slowly, there began to creep over Matilda a most extraordinary and peculiar feeling. Strange feeling is peculiar. The feeling was almost in the eyes, a kind of electricity that seemed to be gathering inside them. A sense of power was brewing in those eyes of hers. A feeling of great strength had settled itself deep inside her eyes. But there was also another feeling which was something else altogether, and which she could not understand. It was like flashes of lightning. Little waves of lightning seemed to be flashing in her eyes. Her eyeballs were beginning to get hot, as though vast energy was building up somewhere. She kept her eyes steady on the glass, and now the power was concentrating itself in one small part of each eye and growing stronger, and it felt as though millions of tiny little invisible arms and hands on them were shooting out of her eyes toward the glass she was staring. So she's feeling these weird sensations in her eyes where it's like hot, and she's like super focused, and something's gonna happen. Tip it, Matilda whispered. Tip it over. She saw the whole glass wobble. It actually tilted backwards a fraction of an inch, then righted itself again. She kept pushing it, and it with all those millions of invisible little arms and hands that were reaching from her eyes, feeling the power flashing straight out like two dots out of her eyes. Tip it, she whispered again. Tip it over. Once more the glass wobbled. So she's like feeling like there's this little hands and arms coming out of her eyes, and she's telling them to tip over the glass. Once more the glass wobbled. She pushed harder and harder and harder. The water in it and the squirming, all of a sudden the glass topped over onto the desk. The water and the squirming newt splashed out all over Miss Trunchbull's enormous chest. The headmistress let out a yell that must have rattled every pane building in the building. The newt clutched desperately to the cotton shirt that covered Miss Trunchbull. The Trunchbull looked down and saw it and yelled even louder. With a swipe of her hand, she sent the creature flying across the room. It landed on the floor beside Lavender's desk, and very quickly she ducked down, picked it up, and put it in her pencil box all at once. The newt, she decided, was a useful thing to have around. The Trunchbull, her face even more red than a boiled ham, was standing at the front of the room shaking with anger. Her chest was going up and down, and a splash of water made it darker. "Who did it?" she roared. "Come on, own up! Step forward, you won't escape this time. Who is responsible for this dirty job? Who pushed over the glass?" Nobody answered. The whole room remained silent, like a tomb. "Matilda!" she roared. "It was you. I know it was you." Matilda, in the second row, sat very still, and she said nothing. A strange feeling of calmness and confidence swept over her. "Speak up, you little clotted carbuncle," roared the Trunchbull. "Admit that it was you." Matilda looked right back at the flashing eyes. "I have not moved from my desk, Miss Trunchbull, since the lesson began. I can say no more." Suddenly the entire class seemed to rise up against the headmistress. "She didn't move!" they cried out. "Matilda didn't move. Nobody moved. You must have knocked it over yourself." "I most certainly did not knock it over myself," roared the Trunchbull. "How dare you suggest a thing like that? Speak up, Miss Honey. You must have seen everything. Who knocked over my glass? None of the children did." "Miss Trunchbull," Miss Honey answered, "I can vouch for it that nobody has moved from his or her desk since this." "I'm fed up with your useless bunch of midgets," roared the Trunchbull. "I refuse to waste any more of my precious time in here." And with that she marched out of the classroom. Miss Honey walked to the front of the room. "Phew, I think we've had enough school for one day, don't you?" The class was dismissed, and they all went to the playground to play. So Miss Trunchbull, Matilda knocked over the glass with her eyes, and she kind of has this power with her eyes that we're going to learn more about. So I hope you're enjoying it. Later this week or next week, we'll do the questions. Bye.